6 reasons why veterans' issues are men's rights and anti-feminist in nature. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and one thing that not a lot of people know about me is that I have done a bit of work with veterans in the past, though it wasn't my actual jobby job, but more volunteer-type artistic stuff that I did, where I helped teach and coordinate veterans to do artistic endeavors and shows. In doing that, I got to know a lot of veterans, and many of them were super cool guys who had a very complicated story about why they joined the military. Granted, this was in the context of far leftist anti-war activism, so we didn't really have any proud patriots around. Though one guy I met ended up being a big shitlord Trump supporter eventually. Regardless, although I did some positive things and it wasn't completely negative, I have come to the point where I have to somewhat disavow a major part of this history of mine, because it turns out that the main organizer I worked with closely is unwilling to get with the times, and he refuses vehemently to investigate men's rights issues and arguments criticizing feminism. This is a person who claims to be a veterans support activist, but refuses to even look at statistics and arguments about either gender-specific male issues or the fact that feminists have fought tooth and nail to suppress the data around these issues. Why is that? Well, I can't say for 100% certain, because I've attempted to have a conversation with him numerous times over the course of the past year, and he refuses to even hear me out at all. And instead, he just tells me that he thinks I don't know what I'm talking about. Like, he knows more about feminism than I do, even though I've been studying it for like 2 years nonstop, and I have a fairly decent-sized YouTube channel discussing it. Sure, I bet. He just knows more than I do. Anyhow, he won't even listen to a single one of my arguments, claiming that he's disinterested, and he's supposed to be a veteran support activist, and he's not interested in male issues. So I think it's safe to assume that his reasoning is that he's a far leftist who has benefited personally a great deal from the activist community in the San Francisco Bay Area. And since basically absolutely everybody there identifies as a feminist, he can't bring himself to even glance in the direction of feminist criticism, because that would basically require him to realize that everybody around him has a drastically flawed worldview, especially in regards to veteran issues. So he's supposed to be a veterans activist, and therefore all of this makes him a whopping mind-blowing hypocrite. Here are some reasons why. Reason number 1 why veterans' issues are a distinctly male issue is suicide. Male suicides are already 78% of suicides in the West, and in 2012, an estimated 6,500 former military personnel died by suicide. That's quite a lot more than one person a day. However, is this a feminist issue? Why, yes, according to many regressive media outlets, it absolutely is being treated as a feminist issue. Because, of course, everything is supposedly a feminist issue, because feminism is basically a creepy religion. This is what I got when I Google searched gender of veteran suicide. Seriously. Each and every article here reports the increase of female suicides among female veterans. Now, I'm not saying that this isn't tragic, because every suicide is tragic, nor am I saying that I am indifferent to the details around the increase in female veteran suicide. But I won't in this video get into it, not simply because that is not my area of focus, but more so. Even with the increase, male veterans are still killing themselves more often, proportionally to female veterans. And then you take into account how many members of the armed services are male as compared to female, which is the men composing around 85% of all of it, If you know that, well, considering male veterans are also killing themselves at a higher rate than females, and they are the landslide majority of veterans, this is a distinctly male issue. And yet it is being spun as a feminist issue? Can we see how we already have a problem? The second point illustrating why veterans' issues are men's issues is homelessness. In 2016, around 8% of the total population of homeless people in the United States were veterans. And though I could not find exactly how many of those homeless veterans were male, in 2011, it was shown that veterans made up 14% of the male homeless population in total and 2% female homeless people in total. So again, homelessness from veterans is drastically higher in males than it is in females. How else can you say it? The third thing I want to bring up in relation to veterans' issues being distinctly male is prison and convictions. According to the Bureau of Justice reports, in 2011 through 2012, 8% of prison inmates were veterans, which is a rather high number, I think. I couldn't find which percentage of those veterans were men. However, we can assume it's mostly male, as most veterans are males by a landslide, but even more so, men get something like 6 times the sentencing of females on average when convicted for the same crimes with the same record, and are far more likely to face wrongful convictions. The fourth thing I want to bring up about veterans' issues being distinctly male is mental health care. It's no mystery that men are far less likely to seek out mental health care, and veterans are at about the top of the list in terms of the demographics most likely to need this. Veterans, who again are mostly male. So, well, here's a few of the search terms that I got when I Googled women's mental health care. As you can see, numerous specific listings came up designed to direct women to concrete ways of helping them find gender-specific mental health care. Here's what I got when I searched for men's mental health care, which, mind you, should have its own separate listings because males heal differently in therapeutic settings than women do. Odd, isn't it? Not a single male-specific listing comes up immediately in terms of helping them actually find something that'll help them, but rather just some articles about how male mental health care is a national problem. Which is cool and all, at least they're acknowledging it, but what are we going to do about it? Feminists protest the people who speak about it. The fifth issue regarding male veterans having problems that I want to bring up is fathers' rights and family courts, which are heavily, majorly, undeniably biased against fathers in basically every way imaginable. Seriously, the horror stories are something I can't do justice personally, so I plead that you watch the documentary film The Red Pill by Cassie J, because it introduces many men who have been through it. So, if you keep in mind the notion that the vast majority of veterans are male, and that these are guys that get deployed overseas for several months at a time at the very least, and come back super commonly with PTSD and other mental problems, what happens when a couple divorces and the court directs the woman to a feminist social worker that literally trains the woman in the art of getting everything she can from her husband, who is a veteran, her ex-husband, that is, by way of the social worker telling the woman to accuse her ex of all sorts of abuse and stuff. Yes, this really happens. Imagine being a guy with PTSD, coming home from war, being a loving husband and a father to the best of your ability, maybe being even pretty much perfect, never abusing them or anything, but having your marriage not work out for whatever reason, and then your ex-wife makes up a bunch of lies about you, not necessarily because she started out really hating you, but because there are literally feminists in the court system that were telling her it will be the best thing for her children to get as much money from her ex as possible. And he's a vet and he didn't abuse her, but she's lying about it because a feminist told her to, who works for the court. Think about that. Now is another good time for me to mention male suicide. Just think about it. The sixth and final reason that I think veterans' issues are male issues is the general social hostility towards men, which has been super prevalent in our culture, especially in recent years. This one is very abstract, so I don't have any references to cite besides my own anecdotes, but one particular interaction stood out. I remember the first time I heard a member of the regressive left claim that words are violence. She was some wacky lesbian that I was friends with on Facebook for a while, who was an adjunct professor at a community college or something, and she was always posting completely bafflingly stupid political posts. And she insisted that words are violence, and had the regular mental gymnastics to justify this that you would expect. However, being that I have done volunteer work with veterans, I obviously had to interject myself here and say something. How on earth are you gonna sit around telling somebody who has seen people shot and blown up with their own eyes that words are violence? Even further than that, the armed services are a very masculine culture for an obvious reason. It's about 85% male. Male bonding rituals of taking the cinnamon challenge and other tests of strength and stamina are not hard to find from deployed soldiers if you search on YouTube, though usually only the ones where they dance shirtless tend to go viral. What I think a lot of people don't realize is that men, especially military men, have a way of talking to each other and sharing stories that most people don't quite understand. And from my experience, it really seemed like a lot of them seemed quite lonely without people to connect with in that way. So keep that in mind, and then imagine coming back from Iraq or Afghanistan to find a hyper-feminist United States, as has been the case over the past 3 or 4 years especially, and realizing that everybody demonizes you for the way that you have fun, connect, and basically just exist as a dude. Many or most of these guys thought that they were legitimately protecting their country and doing the right thing. And regardless as to what your political opinion is about the wars in the Middle East, these guys deserve to be treated with basic human decency, and maybe a bit of extra compassion if you can muster it when you realize that they've been through something that you couldn't possibly imagine. So maybe it's not so good to shame them for having toxic masculinity. That's all I have to say for this video. Be like these people so that I can buy a new computer and make better videos, and stay tuned.